we're going to roll into, and this is amazing. Everybody needs to buckle up, pour a glass of your favorite cocktail or juice or, I don't know, water if you drink that, because you are in for a treat. Earlier today, we had the pleasure of chatting with Jeremy Lee about what he calls the Parkhurst run of 1951 through 1963. And, it's our second, what we call master class. We had Sports Car Cartel on to do 1980s OPG, and he hit a home run. So there was a lot of pressure on Jeremy, but boy, did he deliver. I don't think he felt a lot of pressure, but I'd like to think he did. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and roll the interview right now, and everyone enjoy Jeremy Lee's masterclass of the Parkhurst run, 1951 through 1963. All right, we are very excited and thrilled to have Jeremy Lee on as a special guest to continue our masterclass series. We're going to cover 1951 through 1963 Parkhurst. Very exciting topic that Troy and I, right, Troy, we don't know a ton about.
No, I do not. Besides looking at pictures on auctions or going and doing my own research, I do not have a lot of knowledge on Parkhurst hockey cards.
Welcome to the show, Jeremy. It's great to have you here, and really thank you for doing this. I think it's going to be a treat for the audience.
Thanks for having me back, Josh and Troy. Pleasure to be here.
Maybe a good place to start is really, I guess, with the why of the conversation. So we're going to talk about 1951 through 63 Parkhurst. And I guess, Jeremy, in your mind, why is this a significant time period and manufacture of hockey cards for us to talk about today?
Well, I think it goes back to, 1951, post-war, war has just ended. Hockey has come back, or, not necessarily come back. It was always there, but it's ramped up. And a lot of the kids, especially in Canada, are very excited to be able to purchase hockey cards for the first time in 10 years, portraying pictures of their heroes on the ice. And, as you mentioned, the span for Parkhurst goes from 1951 to 63, and then it ends. So it's a real nice pocket of history for the hobby, and I'm excited to get into some of the details.
All right, so are we going to, I assume we'll start with 51, right? Go in a little bit of chronological order here. Yeah,
I can address each of the sets, starting with 1951. Before I get started, I do want to credit Bobby Burrell from the author of Vintage Hockey Collector. His books, I need to shout him out because a lot of my knowledge comes from Bobby's books. So he deserves probably as much credit for delivering this masterclass as I do. To jump in, though, Parkhurst was founded in 1948 by a gentleman by the name of George Kennedy, who worked at Wrigley's chewing gum.
Oh, okay.
And he started Parkhurst, and so it was natural for him, coming from Wrigley's, to be in the gum business, and he paired the gum with hockey cards. To let you know why it ended in 1963, the company, Parkhurst, merged with another company called Grant Products in 1965. And 1965 until 1985, Grant continued on, not making hockey cards, but in 1985, the company closed, and the Parkhurst legacy at that point had ended until 1991, when it was resurrected. We can get into that at the end.
Sure.
So that's pretty interesting. But going back to the beginning, 1951-52 was the first post-war set of hockey cards in 10 years. And these cards were small. They measure 1 3/4 inch by 2.5. So quite a bit smaller than today's standard 2.5 by 3.5 inches. The cards have a blank back, which didn't last very long for Parkhurst. It's a 105 card set. But what's really cool about this 105 card set, fellas, is that 10 years without cards, 97 of those cards are rookie cards. So,
wow.
Yeah, 97 of 105 are rookie cards. Legend has it that these cards, before they were packed into their little wrappers, they were collated in a cement mixer. That's pretty much common knowledge by now for people who study this or know. But that might explain why it's hard to find them in really, really top-notch condition. The wrappers themselves, they came in 4 different colors. And there is a demand for these things, and I don't know which one is I think purple might be the hardest one to come by. I managed myself to purchase a green wrapper at a Vancouver show about 5 years ago. This is what they looked like, fellas. So they're really small because they only had to house the cards. But look at how beautiful this thing is. It lists all the teams down the left, and that player pictured is actually Ted Kennedy, who was the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs that won the Stanley Cup the year before. So that's why he was pictured on there. And it's a little cardboard wrapper. The wrapper, I do believe, is made out of the same cardboard that the cards themselves were made out of. So really cool right there. And
5 cents
the key
too, huh?
Sorry?
5 cents a pack. I know.
5 cents a pack. What we will see is that the run of Parkhurst was 5 cents right from 51 through 64. And there were either 4 or 5 cards in each pack per year, just depended on the year. The 51 set, this is a legendary set for hockey collectors because of those 97 rookies, but the highlights in the 97, the biggest rookies in the set are Gordie Howe, maybe one of the big, not maybe, but definitely one of the most important rookie cards in all of hockey. You've got Maurice Richard, the Rocket, as he was known, Terry Sawchuk. You've got Doug Harvey, who was basically, the Bobby Orr before Bobby Orr came on the scene. You got Alex Delvecchio, Ted Lindsay. They both played with Gordie Howe. You got Bernie Geoffrion, known as Boom Boom, Red Kelly, and Harry Lumley are the most important rookies from the set. And then there's also a Bill Barilko card that's called The Winning Goal. And he was a player who mysteriously passed away. And there was a famous song written about him by a famous Canadian band called The Tragically Hip. So that cool. Kind of wraps up 1951, the highlights of that set.
Hey, so I have a quick question. Are there any known sealed packs from
That's
51?
A great question. I don't know. I don't think so. I've never seen one or heard of one. If there was one, that might be a 6-figure pack.
Yeah. Wow. Do we know if those were, I might have asked this on our live show the other day too. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but do we know if those were they exclusively distributed in Canada or were they available in the U.S.?
Yeah, great question. So I believe that they were exclusively distributed in Canada, and I don't believe that there were any hockey cards distributed in the U.S. until 1966.
Okay, which would be the USA Test kind of Bobby Orr, and then you got the top set. So, gotcha.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting because Topps is synonymous with the U.S. and OPG with Canada, but even the hockey cards that were distributed in Canada in the early 60s that were of the Topps brand, starting in even the 1954 Topps hockey cards were, I believe, printed in the U.S. but distributed in Canada.
Then I guess last comment that I have on 51, Troy, unless you have anything else, is to me it's kind of interesting that I see the parallels between almost hockey and baseball, where you have really the first major post-war set being a set of such great significance, and how important that must be to really the vintage hockey, collectors and just the history of hockey cards.
Oh, it's a great point. It is a very important set, and it's held in such high esteem here that collectors of all ages will attempt to put that set together, even though it's now over 70 years old. People are working on it all the time. When I'm set up at the Toronto Expo, I get several people coming by my booth asking, "Do you have any 51 Parkies?" So they're produced by the company was called Parkhurst, but they were branded as Parkies for several years. They came out with another brand name later, which I'll get to when we get to that year. But people always ask for, "Hey, do you have any 51 Parkies?" Like lots of people collect it, and it's a great set because again, it's only 105 cards. Yet, almost over 90% of them are rookies. So it's a very, very enticing set to collect for everybody.
All right, great. Let's move on to 52 then.
52, 53. So another great year. I love this set. I think it's almost an underrated set. These cards are slightly bigger than the year before. These ones measure 1 15/16 inches by 2 15/16 inches, or clearer said, just shy of 2 by 3 inches. Again, it's 105 cards, 25 rookies. So that's pretty serious still. For the first time, and in their second year, they added statistics and bio data to the back of the cards, and they also added facsimile autographs to the front of the cards, which add that nice little flair. Some of the cards in the set have painted action backgrounds from the stands, the boards, that sort of thing, while some just have solid color backgrounds. I don't know how they decided which ones to do. The wrappers were there's some uncertainty, but some wrappers have surfaced that are made out of the cardstock from the year before. So there's been a 52, 53 Parkhurst wrapper that I've seen sell that has a Gordie Howe rookie from the year before right on it, and other players around it because they were cut into the wrapper die cut. So that's pretty cool. And I do have a copy of one here. Now, this isn't what I just described, but this is the other version, and that's why there's some confusion as to what the wrappers were. So interesting little tidbit right there. Also, for the first time, collectors could send in wrappers, and I think 25 cents, and receive what they refer to as a folio album, or an album to put your cards in. And I do own, actually have 2 of these from this year. I pick these up whenever I see them. I just think they're really neat historical artifacts. And this one's in a magazine sleeve, but you can see if I just kind of open it up that there's pages to put your cards in, and a cool artwork on the front of a goaltender and a player, and a checklist of the whole set on the back appears as well. Really, really neat piece of card adjacent collectible item. The key rookie cards in that set were one of my favorites, the Tim Horton card. I'm known well for being Tim Horton's coffee. That's him. Dickie Moore and George Armstrong are the 3 most important rookie cards in the 52-53 set.
Those albums, do they have any value? Like, are they pretty pricey to pick up?
Yeah, they run about $200, I'd say, depending on condition. And as I mentioned, I do have 2 of them, and they're both written on. So this one here, somebody wrote 1951-52, which was wrong. This is 52-53. And then the second one that I have is this one here, which somebody put their name on. It looks like the person's name was Ty. And actually, no, it says Terry Y. So he wrote Terry Y, TY, put his initials over here, and wrote the year down here as well. So looks like, this one is not in great shape. It's falling apart. There's a rip in the corner here. There's some tape marks on the back. But I mean, I'll buy it anyway because I actually like that this one is more used. There's a story there, there's a story there about Terry Y. And if I could only know who Terry Y was, I might go down that rabbit hole, but I don't have his last name.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's really cool that it's the ones that are beat up and you can tell that they've been used. So you imagine some kid had this in his bedroom, sitting there flipping through it, putting the cards together. So that's really cool that you showed us that. Hey, Jeremy, I got a question on this. These pictures on the cards, are they truly photos, or do they to me, they look like they're drawn? And I don't know if they were drawn from a photo, but I've never understood if they're actually true photographs or if they're like a drawn picture.
Yeah, they're paintings. I believe they're paintings based on photographs. That was the case in 51-52, the year before, the 52-53. A lot of the images are the same. The Gordie Howe picture is the same as the year before. So, yeah, I don't think that they got into actual photographs until, I believe, 54. They had some photographs, but we can discuss that when we get there. Which is only two sets away. Yeah. So the next year, if we're done with 52, would be the 53-54 series. These cards are bigger yet again, and they're actually slightly bigger than today's standard size. They measure 2.5 by 3 5/8, so just a little bit taller than the current modern days cards. The set was scaled back by 5 cards to 100 cards in 53-54, 11 rookie cards out of the 100. Facsimile autos do appear again. A mail-in album was available again for 25 cents. That's what this is right here. I have this version as well, so you can see, fellas, that it's not nearly as nice. There's no art on it. It simply says Parkies 53-54 NHL hockey album. The back does, however, again, have the complete checklist of the 100 cards for the kids to see what they had and to mark them off. And I kind of wonder, was that the precursor to the modern day or even the historical checklist itself, going from the back of an album to a dedicated card? I wonder about that. The first time wax pack wrappers were used versus a little cardboard wrapper, they looked like this right here. They say Parkies, featuring a picture of a player. They actually say Giant on here because they were so much bigger than the year before. They called them New Giant Hockey Gum. And I think the Giant refers to the cards themselves versus the gum. The key rookie cards One of my favorites of all time, the Jean Beliveau, just an absolutely stunning piece of cardboard. You've got Gump Worsley, Harry Howell, Andy Bathgate, Al Arbour, and Bill Dineen. And it's interesting that the Arbour and Dineen rookies, they're mixed up. The cards are mixed up. Arbour's card features a picture of Dineen, and Dineen's card features a picture of Al Arbour. So pretty funny how that worked out, an uncorrected error, as we would call it today. But these cards, I just want to point out how gorgeous they are. The artistry of them, they're so nice. They're just so beautiful, and I recommend them to anybody.
Do we know anything about these early artists that painted these? Was it one artist, or did they hire a series of artists? I'm just curious if these people are known.
I have no information on that.
Well, then probably not, because I would assume that's something that would have been, like you hear of the big company card design firms that design, like, what is it, Arena Company or whatever, that did like PMGs or something like that. So that tends to get known. So just curious.
That's a great bit of information that would be nice to have. I'm not sure. I have to think somebody out there might know. But I mean, imagine the original art from some of these cards, how beautiful they would be if they survived.
Yeah.
And, who knows what the values of those could be today. But I know I'd certainly be interested in having a piece of that.
I do think it's very interesting, the uncorrected error, because last time we did one of these, we talked about the Steve Larmer card that had, I can't remember who the other player was.
It's Ludwig.
Yeah, Ludwig, how they had them flipped. And it
was his rookie too, right?
What's that?
It was his rookie too, right?
Yep, and it was rookie. And it's interesting that was still an issue back in the 50s. So that's kind of interesting.
You call out the Steve Larmer rookie, a very famous, rookie card that doesn't picture the actual player. Another one is Paul McLean, who was really Dale Hawerchuk's key line mate in the 80s. Paul McLean's rookie card, which would have been from 1982, doesn't feature Paul McLean. I forget who it features. So because I'm a Winnipeg Jets collector, I want a Paul McLean rookie card, but I don't want the one that doesn't picture him. So I have his 83, 84 in my collection. I consider that to be his rookie card. But yeah, funny how that happened back in the day. Today, imagine how much blast these companies would get if that happened, and when it does happen.
Well, I've always wanted to see someone list on eBay, like, cut out the Steve Larmer picture and put it on the right, wording, and just make their own kind of rookie card. But yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
So moving on to 1954, the 1954-55 series again is 100 cards like the year before. 12 rookie cards out of those 100, which is another nice level, I would say. Facsimile autographs appear yet again. A mail-in album was available again. Some of the cards have action backgrounds this year, while some are whited out with a star in the background. And again, I don't know why they did that, but it does mix up the set nicely, and we'll see more of that as the years go by. So out of the 100 cards, the first 88 cards had what is known as the Lucky Premium variation on the back. So there's two versions of these cards, and the Lucky Premium variation was used for mail-in. Kids could mail them in and receive some prizes back, or some premiums, either hockey equipment or a camera. There might have been some others, but that's all that I've seen as far as what's been on the back of these cards. This was what's really interesting, guys. This was the last year that Parkhurst included all 6 NHL teams, players from all 6 teams. So the 51 to 54 sets are special in that way, because after that, we have some competition from Topps O-Pee-Chee.
Okay.
But 54, the most important rookie cards are Johnny Bower, which is misspelt on the front as Johnny Bowers. They put an S on the end. Troy, you're laughing. You might be aware of that as you're a goalie. And the other one is Fred Saskamoose, who wasn't the best player, but Fred Saskamoose is known as one of the first Canadian Aboriginal players, the first to play on an NHL team, basically breaking that color barrier, if you will. So that's significant. And that card, for that reason, is very hotly pursued and highly collected by the Indigenous community in Canada. So that kind of wraps up that original 6-team portrayal of a mini phase of Parkhurst within the full 51 to 63 run. Any questions on that before we move on?
So what did you say was the variation on the back on 53? Was it like a lucky something?
Lucky Premium. Yeah, it actually said that right on the back of the cards. Yeah.
I would assume that those are pretty valuable.
You know, I can't answer that, Josh, because for me, I've never collected them. There's another instance of this, a similar situation that comes up in the next year, which we'll get to in a moment, where there's a variation. And as a collector myself, I've always wanted the main card. You know, even for the 66 Topps Bobby Orr, I don't want the USA Test version. I want the one that was pulled out of packs in Canada, widely distributed, all those sorts of things. So that's just for me. That's just my personal taste. So, but because of my personal taste, I've never really researched these Lucky Premium. I skip right by them if I see them. I don't have interest in them, but I would think that they are much rarer, which makes you probably right that they'd be more valuable because so many of them were redeemed. So they just got lost.
I think that, Jeremy, that's a really great point that you make, and it really an interesting perspective, because in a hobby that's so often consumed with what's most rare and uncommon, it seems like from what I'm getting from you is that you really appreciate sort of what was common back then and what was part of the culture and what was part of the experience of the average young collector in Canada where these cards were distributed. And I'm sure you like the best representation of those cards. So you want ones of the best quality, but it's not just the rarest of the rare.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Josh, you kind of just described why I prefer them better than I could have articulated it myself. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. All right, so we can move on to the next set, which is the 1955-56 series. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this set does contain one of my favorite cards of all time. I'll get to that in a moment. But this set was scaled back because all of a sudden, the Parkhurst company could no longer produce cards of the U.S. hockey teams, which were 4 out of the original six NHL teams. So the 55-56 series is comprised of 79 cards altogether, 14 of which are rookie cards. They're only producing cards of Toronto and Montreal. The checklist, I should say, only includes cards of Toronto and Montreal players. This year, I think to beef up the set a little bit, they went from 105 down to 100. Now this year they do 79, but they added cards of what they called old-time greats. So some of the original, like Vezina and those kind of players who are in the original tobacco era sets, the Imperial Tobacco sets from the 1910s. So they included several of these old-time greats. They also included, I believe for the first time, action cards. So, you know, a card that wasn't specifically dedicated to a player, but more or less featured several players, and it would describe the action shot, like, you know, Montreal fights off Toronto or something like that. And then they also had cards of Maple Leaf Gardens and the Montreal Forum. So literally a card dedicated to the arena, to the building, which are pretty cool because those buildings don't exist anymore. So pretty neat that those were preserved in history that way. This was the final year that a mail-in album was available. And so I mentioned, I was talking just earlier about the Lucky Premium, how there's a similar situation later where, well, this year, 55-56, there's basically an identical set that was distributed in boxes of Quaker Oats cereal, aptly referred to as the Quaker Oats set. The fronts are the same. However, the backs are printed in green versus red. So my same theory applies as a collector. I didn't grow up eating that cereal, so I don't have nostalgia for that. I'm too young. I'm too young to have been around in the early 50s and eating cereal and pulling out a hockey card. I, again, prefer to have the red back card, the non-Quaker Oats card, which is what the kids would have been opening up, chewing the gum, trading at recess and all that. I think the Quaker Oats cards are worth more, up to, say, 3 times from what I've seen in price guides, including Bobby Burrell's Vintage Hockey Collector. They are pursued. They will sell for more at auction, which is great because I get to save money when I buy my 55 Parkhurst regular edition. The only card that I personally own from that set is what I said earlier, I'm going to be a broken record, the Jacques Plante rookie card. This card, I'm in love with it. I have a picture of it here, guys. You can see it's at the very top of this image that I posted on Instagram a little while back. Look at the pose. He's basically jumping off of his skates to the side to catch a puck that's coming towards the net. So, and there you can also see the 2 cards of the buildings, the Forum and the Gardens. And then you've got a couple of the all-time greats, the George Vezina and the Newsy Lalonde. So a great set. One of my favorites to just to look at my pictures of, and of course the Jacques Plante is a centerpiece.
Yeah, that Jacques Plante we did our like Mount Rushmores, and we brought a Jacques Plante for goalies, and I think he actually made our Mount Rushmore. We talked about that card a lot because I was just fascinated with, think about like the old goalie styles and skate saves and jumping around and stand up style, and that card is just to me perfect idolization of what a goalie was back then.
Yeah,
I'm glad too, Jeremy, that you pulled up your Instagram, because I actually think that that's a perfect companion to this conversation. So everybody, go to Jeremy's Instagram, Jeremy Lee Sports Card Live. If you're not following him already, you're nuts. And I believe that you created a story archive of it. And it's an amazing visual history of like slide by slide of just the conversation we're having. And I think would add just a wonderful amount of context to this conversation. So really, I would consider that kind of a must sort of companion piece to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's if you're not following me on Instagram, it's jlee_sports cards live, and right on my main page under stories, it's called Sets 101. That's what it's called. So you can just go through and flip through. And I'm currently working through the Topps run starting in 1954. So I've been through all the O-Pee-Chee sets and the Parkhurst. Now I'm working on Topps. So thank you for that, Josh. Okay, so moving on. We just covered 1955, which is, in hockey, which is different than baseball and football. We denote these sets as 2 years. So the 55-56 set, because our hockey season straddles the year, unlike baseball, which all occurs in 1 year. So 55-56 was the Jacques Plante rookie year. 56-57, there was no set. For some reason, Parkhurst took a year off and did not make hockey cards in 56-57. However, several years later in the 90s, a missing link set was produced by Brian Price's In the Game, but that's not the same thing. It's much more modern. So we have to move on to 1957-58. They return after a 1 year break, and now they're competing with the O-Pee-Chee Topps arrangement or partnership, the license agreement between O-Pee-Chee and Topps. They were competing with them for distribution in Canada. So the 57-58 Parker said it's comprised of 50 cards, 16 of which are rookies, 11 Toronto Maple Leaf rookies, and 5 Montreal Canadian rookies. So again, that's pretty neat. 16 out of 50. Of the 50 cards, it's split right down the middle. 25 cards Montreal, 25 cards are Toronto, and this is interesting, guys. Each team's cards are numbered 1 to 25. So there's basically 2 sets within the set, even though it's a 50 card set. Player checklists appeared on the wrappers for the first time. Maybe that's as they recognized that they were no longer making the albums, and the kids of the day needed to have a reference as to what the total checklist would be. So here's an image of the wrapper right here. It's split, red and blue for each team's colors, and then the players on them themselves. So that's the 57-58 wrapper. Key rookie cards. There's a couple big ones. The biggest one being Henri Richard, but pronounced Henri Richard. He was known as the Pocket Rocket. So he was Maurice Richard's younger brother. Maurice was the Rocket. Henri was the Pocket Rocket. You've also got rookie cards of Charlie Hodge. The biggest one for the Maple Leafs was Frank Mahovlich, a very important Hall of Fame rookie card. Then you've got Bobby Bond and Bob Pulford as other ones that are somewhat notable for the 57-58 series. The Henri Richard rookie card, fellas, I've noticed in the last couple of years has really caught on with collectors and shot up in value. It's very hard to find in high grade, even in like PSA 6s and 7s, really tough to find. So when those come up, they command they receive a lot of attention and command very high prices. And they're just beautiful in their simplicity. This is what they look like from my Sets 101 story on Instagram. Simple, nice white backgrounds. The player kind of just sits on the card, almost pops off of it with the name on the bottom and the team logo in the top corner. Just a beautiful series altogether. So that would be what I have on the 57-58 set. Anything on that, guys, before we move on to 58?
So just a little update. I looked up quick. Is it Henri Richard? Did I pronounce it right? All right, great. Top sale on that is a PSA 9, again from 1957 Parkhurst. Went from in 2018 through PWCC Weekly. Quick shout out to our partner there for $10,800. U.S. So yeah, that is pretty valuable.
Yeah, if that were to come up for auction today, I can see that being $30,000 to $40,000 today.
Really?
Just based on, it's like I said, in the past couple of years, this card has really started to catch on more than ever. So if you take the simple, the multiple of 2018 to today for, say, the Hockey Vintage Index, and then you layer on the added attention that this card has been receiving, Maurice Richard won 11 Stanley Cups. I believe that to be a record in all of sports for professional championships, not just hockey, all professional North American sports. So there's a lot of demand for his cards, and he was a gentleman, and just it's a great card. I bought a raw copy back in the 1990s. I had it graded in the 2000s. It's a PSA 5, I believe. And, I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't upgrade that card. Mm-hmm. I cherish it. I love it. It's what I want. You mentioned a bit earlier, Josh, that I like to have my vintage hockey. I want it in as good of a condition as possible. That's true to a point, though. I don't like my vintage cards to be pristine out of the pack. I like my cards to show a little bit of their age, a little bit of toning on the borders, even a little bit of corner wear. Like, I'll take more if I have to, especially as you go back in time. The expense the cost just gets so high. But I like my cards to have a story, and I think if they're in too good of condition, it loses a bit of the luster for me. And maybe I'm an odd duck when it comes to that.
I agree with that 100%. It's almost like, even, I don't know what the right word is. What's that word? Patine or a patina? Like
patina. Yeah.
Where on other, historical or old stuff, you see some wear. I think that's a good thing. And I also wanted to mention for people, this has been on all the cards we talked about, just looking at the images. Like, I absolutely love the old brown gloves that all these guys wear. They don't have the team colors yet. It's just classic old school hockey. Like, the goalies have the pads that weighed probably 50 pounds, where now both pads weigh way less than anything these guys ever wore. So even just the equipment on these cards is just fantastic.
Troy, I love that you make that comment, because I'm now looking at them myself, and my eyes are drawn now to, we were just talking about the Maurice Richard rookie card. I'm looking at his gloves. I mean, they are made of heavy leather. They come halfway or almost all the way up to his elbow. And then you look at Jacques Plante's pads on all of his Parkhurst cards. I mean, you can see how substantial and heavy this equipment was back then. It's a lot different today.
The point I was going to throw in, and I keep thinking about, Jeremy, as you've been going through these last few years, that how short-sighted it was to print Canadian teams in Canada and U.S. teams in the U.S. It's like, boy, if you could go back and convince whoever made that decision to choose differently, that might have helped promote the game at that time as a North American sport a little bit better.
Well, yeah, I believe what happened, historically between these two companies is that obviously Topps was there making baseball cards. And I believe that Topps actually made the hockey cards in the early 50s, like the initial 54, 55 Topps set, which I'm sure you'll do a master class on the Topps set with another seasoned collector. But they were produced in the U.S., but then they were shipped up to Canada to be distributed by O-Pee-Chee. So even though we refer to the 54 Topps hockey cards as Topps, there was O-Pee-Chee involvement there. And I believe that continued up until 1968, when O-Pee-Chee just licensed the images from Topps and then printed and distributed them up in Canada. So again, I believe that both Topps O-Pee-Chee and Parkhurst distributed exclusively in Canada from 1951 all the way until that Topps test set in 1966, which didn't have a ton of distribution. And then 1967, there was no O-Pee-Chee hockey. I mean, there was no O-Pee-Chee branded hockey. And then finally 1968, now we have Topps and O-Pee-Chee. And I believe that was the first year that Topps cards were distributed in the U.S. exclusively, and O-Pee-Chee cards under license from Topps for the images were produced and distributed in Canada exclusively. I believe that's how the history works. And a lot of this knowledge that this information that I'm sharing comes from a couple of, that comes from Bobby Burrell's books. But there's another book that I know you guys would love. And I read this years ago. I pulled it out and started reading it again a couple days ago. But it's called The O-Pee-Chee Hockey Card Story. And it goes back right to the beginning of 1954. This book is written by Richard Scott, Up North Productions. It's copyright 2017, so it's not that old of a book. I would recommend it to anybody. It's now it does have some contradicting information from what Bobby Burrell's book talks about. Bobby says Topps cards were produced in the U.S. but distributed in Canada, whereas Richard's book says sort of the opposite, that they were also distributed in the USA. The Topps cards were also distributed in the U.S. However, Bobby has a specific reference to an article of a Topps executive who states in a public article that basically, quote, "We expect to have U.S. distribution in the near future." And that was quoted in 1965, I believe. So right when they were doing planning the Topps test set. So I just think that Richard's book, while wonderful, has missed one fact. And I think Bobby caught it in his book. All right. And I'm sorry I didn't do much justice to articulate that, but
no, you did. I totally get it, and believe me, I'm just soaking everything in. I don't know about you, Troy, but holy cow.
Yeah, well, I made sure I'm writing down, the books, because those are going to be ordered probably the minute we get off this whole interview.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Bobby's books are out of print, and you can only find a secondhand copy now.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, he self-published. He has 2 volumes of it. The first one has a lot of pictures in it. They're both beautiful. The second one is more of a price guide, but they're out of print. You need to find a secondhand copy. The O-Pee-Chee hockey card story, I would guess you could still find. It's newer, and I think Richard Scott, who published it, probably still has that available on Amazon, etc. So, all right, well, shall we move on then to 1958?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so the 58-59 series, again, this is a 50-card set. 6 rookie cards are included. These cards now are getting to be more the standard size cards that we're used to today. They're 2 7/16 inches by 3 5/8, so basically an eighth of an inch bigger both ways than the others. They feature only Toronto, Montreal players again, but this year, for the first time, Parkhurst uses a brand called Zip Gum. And so this is what that looked like, guys. Here's an example of a wrapper. And these wrappers that I'm showing you for your listeners are basically replica wrappers that I found many years ago. And I have one to represent each of the Parkhurst packs. Just as a reference, I have them. And I think they're pretty cool. They're wrapped up like there's a little piece of cardboard inside to represent what the cards would have been, but they're not real. But it says Zip Gum on here. And that was a brand that I guess Parkhurst tried out beginning in 1958 versus Parkies. They used to say Parkies. They went with Zip. But you know what's interesting is that the hobby, as far as I know, people I talk to today, the hobby never really caught on and referred to them as Zip cards or Zip Gum cards. They were still referred to as Parkhurst or Parkies. The series, it's not that exciting of a series, to be honest. The cards aren't, the design isn't anything special. It never really wowed me as a collector. There's only one rookie card that's at all notable. That'd be Ralph Backstrom. No relation to Nicholas Backstrom of today's Washington Capitals. I believe Ralph Backstrom would have been Canadian, while Nicholas would be Swedish. So not that couldn't preclude them from being related. But in any event, there's really nothing that special about this series that I can share with you. The cards themselves, here's what they look like. And you can just see that they're not, they're nice. The images are decent, but that's kind of where it ends for me. There's nothing spectacular about this particular year of Parkhurst being the 58-59 series. So unless there's anything on that, we'll move on to 59-60.
I would just agree with you on the design. To me, it feels like they're missing just like 1 or 2 little extra elements that to enhance. You're right. The images of the players are fine. But other than that, again, personal preference, it just seems a little plain.
Yeah. Some of them have action backgrounds painted in. Some of them have just plain white backgrounds. I don't know why they ever did that. They've done it, it happened several years. But the next year, 59-60, they jazzed them up a little bit. They added some color. They added some background designs, almost in the what looked to be very abstract sort of hockey sticks on some of the cards. Added some nice color and pizzazz, either red, blue, or yellow. I don't mind them. 50 card set again, only Toronto, Montreal. The checklist this year included some executives from the teams, like general managers, included some coaches. So that was pretty neat. And I think I think Parkhurst at the time said, listen, we're doing these 50 card sets. This is the third year in a row. We only have Toronto and Montreal. We need to add something else to just differentiate the set from one year to the next. So I think that's why they added executives and coaches. This year, collectors could send in wrappers. To win a grand prize was a trip to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Not too bad for 1959-60 for the 1960 Stanley Cup. Rookie cards, again, there's only one notable rookie card. I'd say that this year's rookie card, notable rookie, is more notable than the 58-59. Ralph Backstrom, and this year is Carl Brewer. Carl Brewer is a rookie card that is, he's a Toronto Maple Leaf legend, and I think a lot of people to this day chase that card. Not a Hall of Famer, but still a nice card for, just Toronto legend status type of thing. So that wraps up the 50s. Before we get into 60-61, fellas, any questions till now?
No.
All right.
Unless, Troy, do you got one?
No, I don't got a question, but it's curious that you brought up the coaches cards, because I think we might have had a mailbag question for our show this week, if I remember right, that someone asked about, does anyone ever make coaches cards? And this is actually a history lesson. I didn't know that these existed. I obviously knew Pro Set. I think in the 90s had some coaches cards. I know they did in other sports too, but this helps because now I have another data point for that answer.
Yeah, and even I believe it's 1940 O-Pee-Chee. I know because I have a Conn Smythe card from the I believe it's 1940. And I mean, he wasn't a player at that time. So I'm actually not sure if Conn Smythe was ever a player, but, and it says Connie Smythe. So, the old Smythe division was named after him.
Don't get me started. I keep bickering that I want all the names back to what they were. I want the Campbell Conference. I need everything back to what it was, in the 80s. I want that back. I don't like the just generic division names.
We want our North Stars name back too.
I want the North Stars back too.
Yeah, the Campbell Conference, the Wales, the Minnesota North Star. Yeah, I hear you. All right, moving on, 1960-61. So here we have, for the first time, an American team is, for the first time in about 5 or 6 years, an American team is added to the Parkhurst checklist, being the Detroit Red Wings. So something must have fallen apart between, Topps and the Detroit Red Wings organization. An agreement there must have expired. And maybe it's because Detroit is so close to Toronto, Ontario, that, the Parkhurst company was able to make a trip down. Maybe George Kennedy went down there and managed to work something out with the Red Wings. But in any event, it's a 61 card set, 1960-61, 5 of which are rookie cards. Parkhurst abandoned the Parkies and the Zip brands from the branding of the product. Detroit players were added to the checklist, including the popular Gordie Howe, his first time appearing since the 54-55 series. I like the simple design this year, guys, with the different solid colored backgrounds. There's no notable rookie cards in this 60-61 series, like whatsoever. I couldn't find one that was worthy of mentioning. This is what they looked like. As you can see, you've got either a red, a blue, a yellow, or a white background. And again, it's a very simple design, similar to the year, a couple years before. But with these colorful backgrounds, it really adds depth to the pictures, to the cards themselves. So I like them for that reason. And that's really all I have on 60-61. These mid-years of Parkhurst all sort of blend together in my mind. If I wasn't studying them, I don't know that I could identify them just by looking at them and say, hey, that's 58, that's 59, that's 60, that's 61. But now that I'm looking at them so closely, I might be able to do that moving forward, hopefully.
Well, that's I just want people to go out and look at your story, because that 60-61 Jock Plant pose is something for the ages. Like that, that goalie pose, I don't know what they were kind of going with that, but he's got his glove down by his skate, and it's just crazy, but I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's a great card. I've never owned a copy of that card, and I might want to change that just based on this conversation. So, okay, so that was 60-61. Moving on to 61-62. So 61-62 is a 51 card set. So you'll notice, like, it went from 50 cards for 3 or 4 years in a row up to 61, an odd number. Now they're down to 51 cards in the 61-62 series. There's 5 rookie cards out of those 61. One notable, I'll mention it shortly. Montreal, Toronto, Detroit, the only teams included again. Really cool backgrounds on these cards, though. They really got creative and jazzed up these cards. So I'm going to show them to you guys, and I'll just ask your listeners to go to my story to see them. But look at the different color combinations that they used here, whether it's like yellow, orange, purple, blue, red. I mean, they really added a bit of creativity. And I think that for that reason, these cards are awesome. The 61-62s are maybe the one year that I can tell apart between 57 or 58 through 61. The one key rookie card is Dave Keon. And, I mentioned earlier that Carl Brewer is a legend for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, Dave Keon is a Hall of Famer. He's, I don't know if I call him a top tier Hall of Famer, but he's probably like a second tier Hall of Famer. Very popular card at the Toronto Expo, of course. People are always asking for a Dave Keon rookie card. The Zip brand name reappeared after taking a year off the year before. And the backs featured a magic rub-off cartoon. So if you were to take a penny and rub the back of your card, which we would not ever do today, no. A magic cartoon would appear. So that's really the information I have on the 61-62s. And again, I'll mention again, since we're several years in now, that a nickel a pack every year for these cards, 4 or 5 cards per pack.
Yeah, that's interesting. The closest thing we have to the rub-offs now are the bounties, right? I got to get my code, so I got to scratch off the back. But then I always think, too, Allen and Ginter, those rip cards, I always think are kind of unique, where it's like you got to destroy the card to get the card in between. And am I seeing this right, that those 61, 62 Parkhurst, they had the logos on the back of those cards with the color? Am I seeing that right? Like, that looks really
in the
weird.
background.
Yeah, you are. So, so really cool backgrounds. Several different colors with the team logo repeating throughout that really make these cards pop. And I'm sorry I didn't say it the first time. Yeah, to me, a really important detail is that those colors are made up of the team logo repeating. Sometimes, like for the Jean Beliveau card, for example, the Montreal Canadiens logo is in a solid blue, but it's on a white background. Whereas the Terry Sawchuk, the Detroit Red Wings logo, is in the appropriate red, but it's on a yellow background, which just makes the whole card totally pop. And then, as an example, the Eddie Shack Toronto Maple Leafs card, the Toronto Maple Leafs logo is in blue, but the background is like a magenta, so I don't know if it's a light magenta. It's a really nice looking card.
I'm looking at the Tim Horton that has a yellow background with the Maple Leafs logo in red, and it's an awesome card.
Like that's just it. I don't know how they decided what color combination to use for each player. Like, yeah, the Henri Richard card has the Montreal Canadiens logo in green and the background in blue. These color combinations make this probably my favorite Parkhurst set of all time, like just from a design perspective, not the checklist, but yeah, it's a really cool set, 61-62. And this just the one really key rookie card being the Dave Keon. So moving on, 62-63, not a lot of information to share on this. It's a 54 card set, so 3 more than the year before, 7 rookie cards, none of which are notable at all. This set, though, they used 3 unique designs within the set. I can, again, you'll see that on my Instagram story, but there they are. You've got the vertical one, the vertical design was one of them where it looks a lot like prior years. And then you've got another vertical design where the player is sort of superimposed on top of a hockey puck. And then the third one is a horizontal where, again, the player is superimposed on top of a hockey card. It's hard to see here while I'm showing you guys on the camera, but this is a yellow background and those are the white. So the vertical hockey puck design have a yellow background, whereas the horizontals have a white background. You can see it better as I angle my phone for you guys. So that's the 62-63 series. Not much to share there. Not a set that I think is too popular. I don't know a lot of people or anybody that collects it. I'm sure there are people out there that do, but it's not a very popular set as far as my travels have gone. So with that, guys, we're going to jump into the final year of the Parkhurst run, the 63-64 series. This is the final year until it was resurrected in 1990 by Dr. Brian Price, who acquired the brand from its dormant status. And then he licensed it to ProSet, and ProSet issued some Parkhurst branded hockey cards for a couple of years. Maybe before we get into this one, I'll just go through the rest of what happened to the Parkhurst brand since then, and then we'll come back in time and go back to the 63 series. So again, 1990, Brian Price resurrected the brand, licensing it to ProSet. After ProSet went bankrupt, Brian Price then licensed the brand to Upper Deck for 5 years. In that period, I believe that Upper Deck violated the contract, and Brian Price was had it again. And as he said he was on my show Sports Cards Live a couple years ago, and he tells this whole story of what happened there. So I can refer people back there for a nice 3-hour conversation I had with Brian, where he goes through that whole story. But from 2000 to 2003, when coinciding with Brian Price launching his own hockey card brand called In the Game, he made Parkhurst cards under that In the Game banner from 2000 to 2003. During the 2004-05 NHL lockout, the NHL decided to give Upper Deck an exclusive license for cards, so Brian Price was left with no choice but to sell the brand to Upper Deck, who have now been making Parkhurst cards ever since. And the brand lives on today, all because of this run we're talking about today being from 1951 to 1963. So with that, unless you guys have any questions on that history that I might be able to answer, I'll jump into the 63-64 series. Is that all right?
I just have one quick comment that I think dovetails into the points you just made. I don't know if you saw this, Jeremy, but a month or so ago, Upper Deck announced that they're bringing back a Parkhurst hobby set called Parkhurst Champions for 22-23 that actually has a lot of tie-in to the old Parkhurst sets. And we did a preview of it. I think that they look pretty awesome, and I'm hopeful that people will like the set. And it's kind of cool for them to be pulling back into that history a little bit.
Definitely. They're very fortunate to have this brand, and like you just said, to be able to dip back into history and revive it a little bit, and just using the brand name. The Parkhurst brand it's a hockey only sort of thing, right? It's not, it's not like where O-Pee-Chee made baseball cards and hockey cards. It's really specific to hockey, and we love it for that reason, among others. Just the fact that there's so many great rookie cards of legends that were released throughout its run. So thanks for that, Josh. So 1963-64, it's the final year of the original Parkhurst run. It's a 99 card set. Again, I don't know how they came up with that. There's 16 rookie cards in it altogether. Now, there's a couple of nuances to this series, so I'll get to that in a moment. But there's 6 Montreal Canadiens rookie cards, but there's 2 of each player, so there's actually 12. So what happened in this year is that there were 2 main designs used for these cards. One have these flag backgrounds, and the one card that's very famous is the Gordie Howe, where he is sitting in front of the American flag. It's a beautiful card. People might say, well, why he was Canadian? Why is he in front of the American flag? Well, he played for the Detroit Red Wings, an American team. So they put him in front of the American flag. They also used the Canadian flag. However, the Canadian flag wasn't then what it is today. So it looks more like a British flag, but that's what that's how the Canadian players were featured against what was at the time the Canadian flags. The other design used, and I don't know how to describe it perfectly. I actually tried to do a bit of research yesterday. I describe it as a vertical Venetian blind motif.
Okay? That's awesome. That's pretty good.
It's like an 80s bad intro graphic designed to
Max Headroom.
Yeah, to a show or something. But you nailed it. It is Venetian blind something else.
Yeah. And I do love them because even if you look at the Jean Beliveau, the blinds themselves are red, and then you can see the yellow sun kind of coming through the background. Whereas the John Ferguson that I show up top there has the blue blinds and just white coming through. So again, I love the use of different colors that Parkhurst deployed this year. I think it's really, really cool. So there's these 2 designs. Now, in coming up with these 2 designs, they also made 2 cards for many of the players. Not all of them, but many of the players. And that's why several of the players have 2 rookie cards this year. So there's 6 Montreal Canadian rookies in the set. All 6 players have 2 rookie cards within the set. There's 2 Toronto Maple Leaf rookies in the set. Only one of them has 2 cards. The other one has 1 card. And then Detroit Red Wings, they only used 1 design for the Red Wings, being the flag design. They didn't use the vertical Venetian blind motif design for that year. So there's 5 Detroit rookies, and they all have 1 card in the series. There were also, interestingly, 3 different wrappers used this year for the first time. They don't look that much different from one another, but here's what they looked like, guys. These are all the 63-64 wrappers, and the colors are the same, but one of them features a player in a puck, the other one features a player in the Stanley Cup, And the third one features a couple of kids playing like a table hockey game. So don't know why they did that. Maybe just to spice things up. But I got to say, I like the creativity, and I like that they were looking to draw in kids' attention that way. Rookie cards this year, there's 4 that I feel are notable. You've got Jacques Laperriere of the Montreal Canadiens. You've got John Ferguson of the Montreal Canadiens, who, interesting tidbit, he ended up becoming the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets in the 1980s. And when he actually moved out of Winnipeg, my aunt and uncle moved into his house. So I got to spend a lot of time in John Ferguson's old house as a kid. You've got Alex Faulkner. Now, Alex Faulkner this card is of legendary status because he is the Maritime Provinces, Newfoundland's at the time, he was the first hockey player out of Newfoundland, and the Newfoundlanders, the Canadian Newfoundlanders, are extremely proud of that. And that card creates a lot of excitement because of that fact. And then the fourth guy is Cesar Maniajo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, and I know you guys like to figure out how to say players' names, but I'm going to go with Cesar Maniajo.
You're right at home. You're right at home with butchering names. We butcher everything.
Right at home on the Gong Show. So that kind of wraps up, fellas, the Parkhurst run from 1951 through 1963, based on what I've known myself, my own personal preferences, and I leaned heavily, again, another shout out to Bobby Burrell and his Vintage Hockey Collector books. And I also did consult with Richard Scott's O-Pee-Chee Hockey Story as I prepared to deliver this masterclass on the Hockey Cards Gong Show.
Holy smokes, Jeremy. I need a cigarette and I don't even smoke. That was amazing. Wow. You know, I like to call you the Oracle, and holy cow, I think you are the Oracle. You are a treasure in the hobby and someone that we really respect and look up to just for your knowledge and your advocacy for the hockey card market. And that's just what an amazing introduction for people that maybe aren't aware of this era of hockey cards. And dude, you just did a fantastic job. Can't thank you enough for that. So while we have you for a couple more minutes, I just want to take the opportunity to let you give us some updates. Is there any update on TAG or any updates on shows or things that you have personally going on that people should know about?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for all those kind words, Josh. I'm grateful, and the feeling is mutual with you guys. I love what you guys are doing. I love that you guys are bringing so much attention to hockey cards. You do it in a great way. Your podcast is so entertaining. I listen to it just about every one, and your Instagram account is it's almost like its own thing. That is, yes, it's the Hockey Cards Gong Show, but it does probably as much good for the hobby and hockey cards as your podcast itself does. So keep up the great work there, and thanks for the opportunity for some updates. So in terms of tag grading, yeah, we've been busy behind the scenes working on a lot of things. We put out an update to our email list a couple of days ago. Well, that would have been on last Friday, basically announcing that we've actually adjusted our grading scale. We have 1,000-point grading scale, which we then assign or match up to the industry standard 10-point grade. So we haven't changed our algorithms, our grading methods. Nothing has changed at all there. We've just basically moved our 1,000-point scale to align better with the industry standard. So the pre-scale, a tag 8 would run from a 775 to an 824. Now we've changed it. We found that we responded to the hobby who told us that's not intuitive. A tag 8 should start at 800.
Yeah.
And a tag 9 should start at 900. It shouldn't start at 25 lower. So we made that adjustment to be clear. It's no harder now than it was then, no harder or easier now than it was then to get any grade. It's all the exact same. We've just moved the scale. So that's one thing. We're also now accepting pack-pulled manufacturer authenticated autograph cards. So that's another pretty cool thing there. And we're planning to do on-site grading at the Burbank show in Ontario, California, this coming 2 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks from now. So that was the gist of our email announcement there. But and then finally, we are moving to a drop sale strategy and versus just having the store open, and that's to continue to control our intake as we work through some process improvements and that sort of thing. So yeah, things are going great at TAG. We've been quiet because we just really don't want to drum up more business than we're able to handle right now. But once we are scaled, we expect that to be really within a few months. You'll be hearing a lot more from us across the hobby. So that's my tag update. And personally, actually really exciting. Just on Monday, so 2 days ago, I got to interview Gary V for my Sports Cards Live show. Now, Sports Cards Live has always been, I've done over 300 episodes under my different shows, but the Sports Cards Live has always been live. I've never done a pre-recorded podcast and then uploaded it. Well, that changed. I couldn't get Gary to come on Saturday night, so I had him Monday at 3:00, and I got about 18 minutes out of him, and we recorded, and that will be dropping on my YouTube channel tomorrow, Thursday at 10:00 Eastern. That will be dropping. So that's pretty exciting. He's somebody who, when I first launched my podcast, guys, I put a bunch of yellow sticky notes on my wall right over there and of names of people I wanted to get. 2.5 years later, I started April 2020, so we're almost 3 years later, I was finally able to take the last name off my wall, and that was Gary V. And at the beginning of the episode with him, I actually said, okay, Gary, before we get going, I got to do something somewhat ceremonious. I kind of lean up and I grab the sticker. I go, I got to take that off my wall. That's been up there for almost 3 years. So thanks for making the time and coming on Sports Cards Live tonight. So that would be my Sports Cards Live update for now. Oh, I guess I could also mention, Josh, that you and I have teamed up to do a PWCC weekly hockey auction coverage on the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel. I've done lots of auction coverage shows in my time doing Sports Cards Live. I covered their premiere auction with Adam Gray, so they're also sponsors and supporters of my channel. And now I thought I want to do the hockey auctions, the weekly, and I couldn't think of a better real person to come on as co-host than Troy. Troy wasn't available, so I went with Josh.
Yeah.
And now, so that's exciting too, Josh. We did our first episode, as you know, this past Sunday, and we'll do it again this Sunday. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to keep doing those too. Well, okay, again, if you don't follow Jeremy on all the social platforms, go ahead and do that. It's @Lee_Sports Cards Live, right, on Instagram. Search for Sports Cards Live on YouTube. That's where kind of, I think, your main video or your shows air, and then you also will do audio versions on podcast networks too. Jeremy, thank you. This was amazing, and we'll can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed this. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, thank you again to Jeremy Lee for joining the show. Boy, Troy, that was something, huh?
Yeah, that was amazing. Got to sit back, listen, throw in a couple of questions here and there, but man, I learned a lot, and I love that he also mentioned those couple of books that are available if anyone else wants to go hunt for those. I think that'd be a great couple of books to read.